Hey guys, it's Boban and I'm back with another video. This one is a critique for Ahmed on the Patreon. If you want to get one of these, you can join the critique/commission tier on the Patreon and you will get either a 20-minute critique video or a small commission every month. There are links to the Patreon and everything else down in the description. So today we have a illustration of the Balrog and Gandalf with the "You Shall Not Pass" scene. So I have also the lines and the sketch to check out on this one. The first thing I want to say, and I'm going to blur this to make my point, but I think you did pretty good on the values on this one. Even if I blur this quite heavily, it is very clear what is going on. There's a really clear silhouette here. We've got a lot of brightness in this area, and you've got a nice set of shapes that you've defined with the Balrog over here, and you've even got a bit of light down here that's exaggerating the bridge, so I think that's really good. I know in the last critique that I did for you as well, I mentioned that that was something that you did very well on with the silhouettes and the shapes and the values and getting things to stand out and read very clearly in 2D shapes on a canvas. Next, I want to look at the sketch. So with a lot of this background, you have the lines there quite skinny, where you've sketched them in, and it looks like you've nibbled more at the shape of the Balrog, and I know that you were trying to play with the design a bit on him, so it makes sense that it looks like that. But when we get to the line art, I noticed that everything in the back becomes a bit darker, and that is distracting from what is going on in the front here. It's not quite as bad when you put the colour on because they sort of disappear a little bit, but they're still poking through a lot of this light that you have, and making it more visually noisy. Like there's a lot of contrast between like this bit here and the light right here, where if you wanted to concentrate that more, you could probably bring the lighter colours into the Balrog, or, you know, where we have it more condensed around here. And that is almost fighting with that highlight that you have. And the light source. You also mentioned that you did want to put flames onto the Balrog, but that was an issue. And I think what might be going on here, my suspicion, is that you have this very bright light source here. Let me eyedrop this actually and see. Let's see how bright this is. Okay, this is quite bright. It's not like right at the top. It's not like this kind of brightness, like absolute white, but it's quite bright. So I'm wondering if having this one light source be very bright and this being your brightest value and that mostly carrying all the way over here, there might be a problem with trying to get those light sources to interact and balancing the values to give enough room to each of them in terms of how much of the value scale you're choosing. So, you know, you're kind of around this area where it's quite small for the highlights. So if you wanted to add another set of like really bright highlights with the flames in, you already have a lot of this value over here. So they're gonna fight. Or you wouldn't really have much wiggle room to discern one from the other. This also plays into something I wanted to mention with the lines as well. I'm not sure what this line is. This big circle around here, it gives me the impression that that is sort of the halo, maybe, corona of light that is around the glow that is coming from Gandalf's staff here. But it looks a bit confusing with the way that it blends into the shape of this wing as it moves around this way and swings there. So especially where it's overlapping, and I wasn't sure if it was something connected to the knee also because of the way that it moves around this way and starts to curve off to the side there. Unless that's supposed to be his tail, or was supposed to be his tail actually, because that would be pretty cool as a framing device. I'm not sure if that's what you were thinking, but my idea now from just looking at that actually is that maybe his tail was supposed to come around this way, and you could have had some flames and done some highlighting around here with the fire to get it to frame what's going on. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that's the intention, but that's kind of how I'm looking at it now. You could play that up has a whole lot with composition. So depending on what that is supposed to be, if it's a notation for the lighting or whether it's the tail, I would be careful of how you have some tangents here where that's lining up with the wing and it looks like it's lining up with the knee there. But I do think whichever one of those it is, it looks cool. It just might not have been such a good idea to line it so heavily. And for some of the placement, as I've just mentioned with these pieces. I'm assuming also that you wanted this to be more heavily inked. And as I mentioned before, you have these pretty big chunks of lines in the background and the way that that is sitting on top of the colours and some of the lighter colours in this is making it a bit distracting. I think you could maybe wash them out. It depends what you're trying to do with these, because if you have sort of a recessed shape like this and then the side of it is being cast completely into shadow, I think that could look cool. But if you were going to do that, I would maybe extend that to the rest of the image as well. So I like that you've drawn the underside of that bridge as well, because I can see that you're trying to use that to give a sense of scale. So, you know, the bridge would be like this if we did a cross section. And then you are also kind of mimicking the same angle in the Balrog here. So I can see, I think that might partially be his shoulder pose as well, but you do kind of have it in the hips too. I can see you trying to put in a perspective and follow lines like this. I guess you can kind of see it in Gandalf too. There's a little bit of mirroring of that, but again, I think that might partially be the pose. But I would try doing the same thing as you did with the last one, where you had the perspective grid set up and were drawing on top of it and trying to make things fit into it. What I'm thinking as well, if you wanted this to be something that was more heavily lined and that the darker shading was confined to that, like you've got quite a lot of little heavy bits of line around here in the corners, which looks cool, that you could absolutely expand on. And I think it might also be the problem you were having where you're not sure how to get the flames onto him, because how do you ink something that has those two light sources interacting or has one light source emanating from it? So something I think you could look into is starting to figure out how to break the line art a little bit. I'm just going to go over the top of this. So maybe you could try keeping the edges softer like this so that we would have room for the lighting from this light source to come over and hit and kind of wash out anywhere that that light is hitting and make it softer. But I think you could also do it along the back side where the light is facing the other way, but maybe start breaking it up into flame shapes a bit like this, and then also nibble into the form slightly. So I can see what you're doing, where you want to make sure that you have that form down and that it's readable and understandable. And then it's the problem of, how do I get all these other shapes back onto the top of it? You know, especially when you've got that internal glow, or, you know, the form itself is emitting light. But I think you could still do this and have like a heavier line like this. So you can see I'm blocking out the muscles with my inks like this, and then I'm just eating away into it a little bit, just to give you a quick example of what I'm thinking for a direction that you could go in with this. And as I mentioned, if you do this straight away, it's going to give you more of that contrast in the inks. If that is something that you wanted to lean into, it makes the Balrog more of a focus. You could probably put more shading on Gandalf too if you wanted to do this and block his silhouette out. Maybe even a little bit down there. I think there's plenty of room to start looking into bits of hatching like this as well for the flames to make it seem as though they have more movement like this. Let's add some of those flames around this side of the arm as well so that he is covered in it, and then onto the wings as well. Actually, let's do that. We'll go up onto the wings. So you can see I'm kind of trying to keep the form, but any of that fire is like sitting over the top of it slightly. So I would maybe cover him in flames by doing that, and just think about it in silhouette. You probably will have a bit of help with this actually, because you have a very clear light source here, so if you were to pull the lines away from this, it should give you an idea of where things are going to cast, or like, you know, where is the front plane that this light source is going to hit. So, you know, like this kind of plane around here, so you would have those horns lit up at the front, and then you can nibble into that. I do think this would be difficult to make it not look like fur also. He does look like a little bit of a furry monkey at the, at the moment, but I would experiment with the way that you are blocking the values like this, and maybe start to think about it like you are carving something out. I'm gonna draw his tail in too, actually. I think that would look really cool as a tail. If you wanted to lean into this style more that I think you're going for, it would be helpful also to go and grayscale some references of fire so that you can start to pick up like where you need to shade and where you can, you know, block things out, and then start adding that in over the top to give it the shapes and the look of fire rather than fur. So if I had more time, I'd probably go and add more like kind of midtones in here so that it had more of that translucent kind of look, and then the glow around the edges of the flames. And then the rest of the fight would also be trying to figure out how much of that detail do I add in, and how much of the anatomy needs to be clear and peeking through it that you can hatch in with midtones. I'm going to reduce some of these lines in the background as well, just to show you what I'm thinking. Right, I'm going to take this layer and duplicate it, and I'm going to edit, convert brightness to opacity so that I can pull those lines out from there. And I'm going to duplicate the colors that you have as well, and adjust some of the values so that we have an idea of what's going on. And I think I'm going to take that as a rough block for the values and start painting with this. So we want him to, we want the two different light sources for a start, and I'm gonna choose, let's go for maybe not the lightest color, but we want something bright for over here. I'm gonna try and do this in grayscale too, so I would want to center my brighter color there. I'm not going to go all the way up to the brightest color just yet, but maybe later I will want to just put a little blob there. Let's do it now just to get the idea across, and then I would start to wash that out over this way. Pull it out a bit. I think I'm going to use some of this tail too to block that shape out. I do think that's a nice shape. We could even have some of that sort of reacting with it like so. I'm going to highlight Gandalf around that silhouette to help play that up as well, so that we have this darker color and then a midtone, and then we have more of the highlights. If you wanted to like really make this harsh, you could just go with the highlight and the shadow and not really play too much into those midtones, like this kind of thing. Then I'm going to start trying to think about how is this light going to hit the Balrog, so I would start trying to block him in like this. And as I say, kind of going along those planes that I talked about, blocking out around the front. And as that got further back into these bits of fire, I would want to paint in the highlights into that to give it a bit of its own glow, like so. And also give him that bit of glow around the edge so that he is actually kicking out some light like this. And as I'm going, you can see I'm trying to wash this on quite soft so that it's not competing as much with the brightness that we have here. I'm even going to take a little bit from there because we want this to be the brightest piece right in the middle. I like what you were trying to do with this also, where you can tell that you have a light source and you're pulling outwards from that. I just think that where it is interacting with the Balrog, it could look slightly different. Because a lot of the way that you are getting this difference in the intensity of the light seems to be by using a brush that washes out into a lower opacity or is a lower opacity by default. So almost like felt tips, where the more you go over that line, the stronger it's going to get. So I can kind of see here where you have a few strokes and they're overlapping, and in the middle you get this brighter color where it's kind of doubling up, and everything over here is washing out as it gets further away. I'm going to add in some more of those flames on the top so that you can see what I mean by adding that sort of translucence onto them like this, so that they have a glow, but it's sort of emitting from the edges of the flames. And like I say, if you go in grayscale, some reference images of flames, it will give you a better idea of how to put this together. You can see the way that it's emitting more of its own light where it's in this shadow, and we don't have that light source here hitting and sort of washing out more of what's going on with the flames themselves. You could bring that down further into the hands as well, and then have the glow around there on the side of the bridge too, to make that play up, and also around that tail. I'm not sure if the Balrog has a glowing mouth. I'm going to see if I can give him a glowing mouth, so we could also make that a point of more interest or more heavy contrast by filling that in with a bright value also. I think I had a darker color underneath here. Yeah, like this. So there is a heavier contrast there. Again, try and block his eyes in around there. And I think this, after a certain point, becomes how much do you want to spend time painting textures, painting textures in like this. Like how much patience do you have for painting textures? Because you could go crazy with this, and go and add even little more highlights in, and just keep going and going and going. Swing back around into these more mid-tone colors as well, like this, and then like I say, I want to keep that glow around there and also around the hand in that direction. Another good reference for drawing the Balrog, actually, if you wanted to make it look like he had more of an internal glow to him, is to get reference images of people and then invert them. Just photos taken of people in normal lighting, and then invert the values and maybe tint it into an orange color. Put a color layer over the top that's more orangey, so it's more in the direction that you're trying to go, and that will give you something that looks like it's glowing internally. So that could be helpful as a reference for this sort of effect that I think you're trying to go for. Oh, there's the glow that I accidentally turned off. And let's do another layer of darker colors underneath. I'm going to wash those on quickly, and then I'll go back to the back corner here and start painting that in so that we have more contrast there. I can do it around Gandalf as well and give him a bit more contrast. Down in the corner. So you can see where the darkest color and the lightest color are next to each other is where we have Gandalf here. So that's like the main light source and focus, and then everything is a bit more washed out over here. I've done it a bit heavier around the mouth to make that stand out. Okay, and then lastly, I think I'm gonna go and play up these highlights like this. Okay, so if we come out from our light source like this is what we're trying to do, right? And we want it to mostly go in the Balrog's direction. And I'm gonna do this quite like rough at the moment, just to get the blocks of it down. I do think it would be cool if you had some of these beams of light hitting parts of the Balrog and not moving past them. So you would have some bits that would hit over here, and you would have bits that would maybe go behind where that arm is. Maybe you could do that, and then have the arm blocked out so that that is giving you more layers, because in your version I can see that a lot of it is not splitting like that, and it's not giving you the depth that might look cool. Now I am painting this with more of a washy brush just to get these blocks down like so, and then I'm gonna have a mess around with some of these values. We could maybe even have that come forward, or some behind here, and have them move behind the bridge to play that up. But again, we don't want that as bright as everything else. And then I'm gonna wash out what I don't want to be as heavy, and I think I am still gonna have to do some more adjustments to this to bring it in line with what I'm trying to do, and maybe adjust the values overall. So let's try doing that. You can see also I've done that on top of the line layer just to bring that down a bit. Now if you wanted to do that and reflect it in the line art, I'm not sure if it would start to look messy with how many textures would be going on with the flames and the skin tones shading that. But you probably could, if you planned it out in advance where you wanted to put these beams of light, you could maybe sort of sketch and hatch those in. And just bring everything that's dark up by a value and hatch it to get that mid-tone. So I'm just going to do a value correction layer, and let's really try and calm down what we have here. Okay, so that's more what I'm going for. So we have a line here that links up directly with the Balrog's eyes, going from here to over there. We can have some overlapping with Gandalf. It's still a little bit heavy in some spots, but this is the way I was thinking about it. You can see this is the main light source. This is where it's the brightest. You have more of that I've put in the Balrog's face. With the mouth, we have a little bit of glow around the rest of him, and more of a hint of the fire. So yeah, there we go. Let's jump back to the other version. Where are we? You know what, let's add some color on as well. So let's do something like this, and we can have those colors interact. Remember with glow as well that you want the most saturation of the color and kind of just that outside soft glow. I would probably reposition that other wing as well and have it sort of go maybe into this space, but I think it's very at risk of interacting with that curve around there if you were to do that. But yeah, I think the color would really help to define what light source is what as well, in case everything did get sort of muddled together. But yeah, I hope that helped.